Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of our Microsoft Weekly Azure webinars. And I'm your host, Terence Hermida. I'm the Azure Business Lead for Microsoft Philippines. And this week's topic is about how to run the backend of Windows Virtual Desktops or VDI on Azure. So just a few reminders before we start the actual webinar itself. This entire webinar is recorded and you will get a URL via email, maybe between 24 to 48 hours at the conclusion of this webinar, so you can access and listen to the recording of this entire webinar, including all of the illustrations and all of the questions and answers at your own convenient time using the browser or using a device of your choice. If any point of this webinar you either may have a problem with the connection, you are not able to understand a couple of things, don't worry, this entire thing is actually recorded. There's also a Q&A window, a question and answer window in the webinar interface in your browser. So if you have any questions, just don't be shy and then pop in the questions in the question and answer window, and I will try my best to answer those questions through the answer window, and the answer will pop up on your browser as well. If you don't have any questions during the webinar itself and you have any questions after the webinar, please do send me an email address, and my email address is hhermida@microsoft.com. Okay, so like I said, the topic for today is Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktops. And this is actually quite a new service that we have just released on Azure. It's essentially what it is, how it is described now. So we have a lot of customers who are actually running Windows client desktops on PCs. Of course, this is very typical, but there's also quite a few customers who don't actually run the Windows 10 install on the PC itself, but rather creates a virtual desktop environment served by Windows servers in the back end, and they create a virtual desktop environment served across the client PCs in their environment. So we're gonna learn about, and we're gonna get an overview in the next maybe 45 minutes to an hour or so of what this service is all about on Azure, and how you license it, how you deploy it, and what are some of the deployment considerations that we may want to look at. Now, there are many situations wherein a virtual desktop environment is quite necessary. So the main thing here is that not all Windows users or not all employees or users within your organization probably has their own PC. So for example, like take the case of, for example, manufacturing or factory environments where people actually have to share their PCs. So one person A may log into the same PC, log off, and then person B would log on to the same physical PC, but will require a different desktop experience because they have their own shortcuts in the desktop, they have their own set of applications, they have their own set of preferences, data, and etc. Now, instead of giving them each of those people their own computer, they actually share a computer, and then they have their own desktops and their desktop profile stored in a server somewhere in the back end. So you can see that in a lot of we can see that in a lot of situations, like for example, the aforementioned manufacturing and factory environments, hospital environments, school environments, where students or even teachers will have to log on will have to share multiple devices or share a single device, and even remote situations wherein, for example, you have a construction site, for example. I recall we have one customer that has a construction site. They require about 50 people to have access to a PC, but they only have 5 PCs on site. But they require each of those 50 people accessing the same 5 PCs to have different desktop profiles. And so the only solution that was applicable then is virtual desktops. Now, virtualization scenarios can actually appear everywhere. I just talked through some of them a while ago. There may be environments where you require security and regulations. For example, in financial services, healthcare, and government. We do have a lot of customers, for example, in the banking environment where the actual Windows operating system is not installed on the PC itself, but is actually served in a centralized environment. So we don't want for example, the bank tellers or the certain bank employees to be actually storing data in the PC itself on the local storage, but rather keep it centralized in the server where we can actually have central control and do encryption and things like that. Like I said before, there is also this situation where you require an elastic workforce, where you have, for example, very common scenario here is you have contractors and partner access or short-term employees. You don't need to give them a permanent PC, and their data, their applications need to be stored somewhere remotely in a server centralized, so that and then they access that centralized data and application on any device that they may have within the organization, and that actually reduces the risk of data theft, because when these employees or short-term employees or contractors resign, their data still remains intact on the server itself. Some specific employees, for example, like bring your own device and mobile employees, call center employees, and branch workers. So call centers, this is a very common this is a very common situation in contact centers and BPOs as well. For example, in the call center environment, we do not actually want usually the actual data to be stored on the local PC that the call center agent is using, and at the same time, the call center agent may not be using the same PC or computer on a regular basis, so he or she might be moving to different places. So you want that desktop to follow him or her wherever they go. And then finally, there's specialized workloads like design and engineering, legacy applications, and software desktop. For example, there are some situations where there are um, design and engineering software that need to be run from a central location, and it doesn't necessarily or cannot be installed in a cent in their own PC. So for example, you may have, for example, 5 engineers who want to use a certain type of software, but that software cannot or is not, those 5 engineers are actually not using those software, all of them at the same time. So one of them are actually using it at any one point in time. So you would have, and assuming that the licensing of that software is actually per usage, not per user, then the software can be installed on a central server, and then each of those users can then be using that applications in a remote fashion, virtually. A virtual desktop is now generally available worldwide. So let's take a step back. In a Windows virtual desktop scenario, you have two components. One is you have the client computer itself that will run the Windows operating system and the application, including maybe, for example, Office 365 on the device itself. And on the server side, you have this pool set of servers, usually running Windows servers, Windows Server, as we all know, has the capability of doing remote desktop services or RDS. So these servers, their job is to accept connections from multiple devices, multiple computers, understand who is the user that is actually logging on those computers, and then serve the desktops to that user on the particular device he or she is currently accessing in. Now, what we are trying to do here, or what we are actually talking about here, is that the back-end component, instead of actually running multiple servers in your data center just to serve virtual desktops, you can now run them all on Azure. So we think that this is the best virtual desktop experience because you're delivering it on top of Azure, which is a scalable cloud platform. Versus, for example, we have some customers who actually experience some, let's say, limitations in terms of adding the number of desktops or adding the number of users in their virtual desktop environment, simply because the number of servers that they have in their backend is no longer enough. But you don't experience that sort of thing on Azure because, as you know, in the cloud you can actually scale up anytime you want. The other advantages here, and we're going to be talking about this in greater detail in the subsequent slides, is that why would you want to run virtual desktop backends on Azure instead of running it in your data center? Well, other than the obvious benefit of not having hardware on-premise and not having to manage that environment on-premise, um, and rather running it remotely on Azure, having the scalability, not having to manage all of it, and you don't have to have hardware anymore. There are also other 4 benefits, as you see there on the left side. It is the only platform where you can actually deploy a multi-session Windows 10 experience. And we'll talk about what is the difference between Windows 10 multi-session and Windows 10 single session. It also enables optimizations for Office 365 Pro Plus. So if you recall, Office 365 Pro Plus is the client component of Office 365. So this is the one where you install Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, Publisher, and all of these Office client applications. This is part of Office 365 Pro Plus. It also allows you to migrate your current Windows Server RDS desktops and apps. So if you're a customer that currently is running RDS on-premise already and want to move to an environment because a cloud environment because you don't want to manage these things anymore, then we actually have a migration path for you to go to Azure. And you can also deploy and scale in minutes. So I'll show you a short video demonstration. You can actually see a lot of demonstrations on how you install this. And if you're an experienced Azure user, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say that this is just practically deploying an image from the Azure Marketplace, creating a few VMs sized appropriately based on the number of remote desktops that are expected to connect to the remote desktop environment. And then that's it. So in a few minutes, you already now have an RDS environment instead of, for example, the on-premise experience where you have to configure all of these servers one by one and pull together these servers into a shared server pool so that they can serve remote desktop and virtual desktop requirements from multiple users. Now, what we are trying to do here is that the virtualization hosts in the future. So there are now two types of hosts. You have Windows Server RD session hosts, and you also have Windows 10 Enterprise hosts. The native type of sessions that you have on Windows 10 Enterprise is a native single modern Windows experience, which kind of makes sense because Windows 10 Enterprise is intended to be installed on a single PC. That's why you have a single session Windows experience. So it can run unified it can run UWP applications as well as Win32 based applications, Office 365 Pro Plus, and so on. What Windows Virtual Desktops actually enables is Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session. So the advantage of multi-session over single session is that you can especially in a multiple desktop in a virtual desktop environment is on the back end. If you continue to run, for example, and serve Windows 10 Enterprise single session on the RDS backend, it means that the server will have to actually render a single one-to-one session for each virtual desktop connection towards the RDS server. So you can imagine you can have let's say for example 100 desktops connecting to the RDS environment on-prem. The RDS environment will have to at the same time render 100 desktops and manage all of those at the same time. Whereas in Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session, the amount of resources that's required on the server side actually gets reduced because you can now the Windows 10 multi-session capabilities are now unlocked. But you still can maintain the same capabilities such as running UWP or modern applications, Windows 32 applications, and Office 365 Pro Plus. So let's take a look at each of the benefits that we have on Windows Virtual Desktop on Azure. Before, this is the only option that we have available today in the market for you to run multiple session Windows 10 experience. You can't get this on any other multi-scale cloud provider, neither can you get this on Windows Server on-prem. This is only enabled on Azure. But at the same time, you can also do single session if you wanted to. We can also do store and legacy app remoting. So there are two things that you can actually do on Windows Virtual Desktop on Azure. First is what we've been talking about, where you actually can virtualize the entire desktop. Or if you don't want to virtualize the desktop, you can actually virtualize a single app or multiple apps. So in this second situation, there is actually a Windows 10 client that's running on the PC already that's installed. So that nothing is virtualized as far as that is concerned. But the applications are actually virtualized from the server or from Azure in this case. So that's what we call app remoting. And the other good news is that Windows 7 extended security updates is included. So because as you will see later on, one of the clients that are supported on Windows Virtual Desktop is Windows 7. So meaning that if you have clients who still need or will require Windows 7 instead of Windows 10, you can still provide Windows 7 virtual desktops. Now, the thing is, at the probably by the date that you hear about that you are listening to this webinar, Windows 7 is no longer supported by Microsoft. Windows 7 was released in 2009. It's been 10 years since, so we have to move on from there. And we understand that a lot of customers are still using Windows 7. So if you are still using Windows 7 and after that end of support date, Microsoft will no longer provide support. So if you still want to continue to use Windows 7, you can still do so, and Microsoft will provide support for Windows 7 as long as it is a Windows 7 remote desktop served out of Windows Virtual Desktop on Azure. So this is why I put here in this slide, free Windows 7 extended security updates. So let me repeat that. If you leave Windows 7 on the PC as is, Microsoft will no longer support that. However, if you virtualize Windows 7 desktops on Windows Virtual Desktop Service on Azure, and Windows 7 is now being served as a remote desktop environment, extended support will be provided by Microsoft for free. It also enables optimizations for Office 365 Pro Plus. So one of the secret sauce here is that we make use of containers to make Office more performant in a multi-session environment. So in other words, Outlook and OneDrive for Business actually perform faster compared to that of running Office 365 Pro Plus in a normal VDI environment running on either any hypercloud or even on a local RDS environment. These profile containers enable faster and more performance experience in non-persistent environments. You can also now migrate existing Windows Server desktops and apps. So if you are a customer that's listening to this listening to this webinar, you may have Windows Server, you may already have a pool of Windows servers in your data center whose sole job is to provide VDI or virtual desktop to multiple computers. Now, like I said, if you don't want to deal with those servers and manage those servers yourselves anymore, and rather move it to the cloud to take advantage of the scalability, and also getting out of end of support, you may do so. You may do so right now because we have the migration tools that allow you to do that. We support Windows Server 2012 and Remote Desktop 2012 R2 and even newer. So a lot of our customers are still currently on Windows Server 2012. Don't worry about that. We support that, and you can migrate that over to the service on Azure. You can deploy and scale in minutes. So the backend where you run Windows Virtual Desktop Services or WVD is available across all Azure data centers across all 54 regions and all 140 countries. You have a choice of which data center you want to deploy it to. There is an Azure Management Portal for Windows Virtual Desktop, or I should say you use the same Azure Management Portal to manage Windows Virtual Desktop, so there's not a different tool to manage that. You have built-in security and compliance, and at the same time, you also have the current partner ecosystem extensibility. So more announcements will be coming soon on how we work together with things like, VMware and also Citrix environments on Windows. The other additional benefits of Windows Virtual Desktop includes what you see here on the screen right now. You can do VDI RDSH management as a service on Azure. You can, like I said in a few slides back, you can either choose to virtualize the full desktop itself or just applications. Windows 7 Virtual Desktop is included and is still a supported client, and the good news is that Microsoft will continue to provide security updates with Windows 7 as long as it is a virtual desktop served out of Azure, and it has integrated security management of Microsoft 365. So the supported operating systems that we can do on the client. So what can you run on the what virtual desktops can we run? So we have Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session, Windows 10 Enterprise Single Session, Windows 7 Single Session, Windows Server 2019, 2016, and Windows 2012 R2. So from a licensing standpoint, you may be already eligible for Windows Virtual Desktop. So there are two components of the licensing in a virtual desktop environment. First, you have to license the client, and next you have to license the server. This is in an on-premise environment. Now, what's important to remember is that the licensing for the client is not different, even if the virtual desktop backend is on Azure or on-premise. So we have to be careful here and make sure that we are licensed to run Windows virtual desktops on the client side. But if you're already subscribed to M365 E3E5, E3E5 student use benefits, M365 F1, M365 business, then those subscriptions already include the license or the eligibility to access Windows 10 single and multi-session, and even Windows 7 with Windows Virtual Desktop. So you're all good, you're covered. If you've got Windows 10 Enterprise, Windows 10 Education, Windows 10 VDA per users, as you see here in the list, then you're covered as well. For the server side, customers are eligible to access server workloads with Windows Virtual Desktops if you have one of the following licenses: RDS CAL license with Active Software Assurance. And on the server side itself, you only pay for the virtual machine storage and networking consumed when the users are using the service. Now, this is important. Now, later on, you will see that the way that the service actually runs is no different from how it runs if it was in an on-premise environment, except that it's currently running on Azure. So essentially, it's VM storage and networking. Now, the good thing about this is that while these components are running, uh, while the more you use, it's pure pay as you use basically. So if you have, say, a set of VMs or a set of virtual machines that are running Windows Virtual Desktop to serve, say, 1,000 concurrent desktop users, then the amount of resources that is going to be consumed is going to be the basis of how much you're going to be charged on the server side. Now, I know of some customers who even shut down their virtual machines in manually or in an automated fashion if those users do not need to connect anyway. So we have I know that there are some customers who actually shut down their virtual desktop servers um, for security reasons, for example, because if let's say it's a Saturday or it's a holiday and the users or the bank user or the bank tellers are not in the branch anyway, so what's the point of running desktops, virtual desktop servers on a holiday? So you can do that. And if you shut down those virtual machines, you will not be charged in Azure. Now we also, you now also, because it's running on Azure, you now blend the security and convergence of the Microsoft ecosystem. For example, we take the technologies such as conditional access, multi-factor authentication, role-based access control from Microsoft 365, combine that with the built-in security and trust on Azure, which includes more than 90 compliance offerings, the built-in protection that's provided by cybersecurity experts, and taking advantage of our investments in cybersecurity on Azure, and then the security of the Windows Virtual Desktop service itself, which includes Reverse Connect, Azure ID authentication, and AD joint virtual machines. Let's take a look at what it looks like under the hood. So Azure Virtual Desktop uses Azure Active Directory as the identity management service. It also provides the virtualization infrastructure as a managed service. So all of these things that you see here, the web access layer, the diagnostics, the gateway, the management, the broker, etc., the load balancing, that's all managed by Microsoft. So meaning the control plane that manages the virtual environment, that's all managed by Microsoft. You don't have to configure this yourself because that's what we do. And we just provide you for the tools for you to do the management and the other stuff that you need to do. Now, once you've already configured the virtual desktop environment on the server side, you have this box right here. It represents your subscription. So you can now start serving Windows 7, Windows 10, and remote app capabilities. The compute, the storage, and networking that's required to run the virtual desktop backend, that's managed by Microsoft. And practically the only thing that you need to do is just to set up privileges and access privileges on which users and what type of desktops they will require, what types of profiles. The very typical day-to-day administration of remote desktop environments from a user's administration standpoint. But for the back end and managed services, you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's Microsoft that's taking care of that. So you manage using existing tools such as Configuration Manager, Intune, and so on. I don't know why this slide is right here in the middle, but anyway, we've also made in parallel with the Windows Virtual Desktop Service Availability announcement the program called App Assure. This is our commitment to ensure that your apps works on the latest version of our software. If you encounter issues, we will try to help you remediate them at no additional costs. So this will kind of put at ease any concerns that you may have that, oh, I don't want to move to Windows 10 because I have applications that are currently running in Windows 7 and I'm not sure if it's going to work. And that's the reason why I'm sticking with Windows 7 because um, the application, that's the main reason. The main reason because I know that the applications, or I'm not sure if the applications are going to work on Windows 10. So in a Windows Virtual Desktop environment, if you choose to provide Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session desktops, the virtualized apps that run on Windows Server RDSH will run on Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session as part of WVD. For normal Windows 10 Enterprise Single Session, any apps that running in any Windows 7 and Windows 10 VDI environment will run on Windows 7, Windows 10 Enterprise as part of WVD, and apps running on Windows 7 and 10 client devices will run on Windows 7 and Windows 10 Enterprise as part of WVD. So if you want to get more tools and more assistance and have any more questions, just go to this URL down here, aka.ms/app. We also acquired a company called FS Logics, which we incorporated as part of the Windows Virtual Desktop Service. Now, FS Logics actually has a pretty nifty solution uh, that provides a lot of technology that basically does one thing, which is to optimize the experience of customers of Office 365 on both virtual and non-virtual environment, but more so on the virtual environment. So it does three things. For example, it creates what is called a profile container. This is the replacement of the good old roaming profiles and folder redirection. So what if you remember back in the day, I don't know if you still do it now, in Windows Server 2012 virtual desktop environment, you have what is called a roaming profile that is essentially stored as a set of files in the Windows file system. What FS Logics brings in is that it uses a sophisticated profile container technology that replaces roaming profiles, which dramatically speeds up logon and application launch times. It also includes a container for Office 365 so that your cache data for Office, things such as your OST for Outlook, your cache for OneDrive, your global access, your global address lists, your preferences for Office, like environments and shortcuts and menus, etc., etc. It all is part of that profile container, which is accessed every time you invoke or every time you start an Office 365 client application, such as Outlook or OneDrive. It also does app masking. It minimizes the amount of gold images by creating a single image with all applications. So no longer do you have to have a gold image that you need to put in a network share somewhere that you have to install for each and every instance of Office 365 or each and every instance of any application. So what FS Logics actually does is to have a single instance of that application running on the WVD environment on Azure and just simply virtualize or mask the running of that application so that each user will appear to be running a different instance of the application itself, as if it was installed separately for each user. Java redirection also helps protect the enterprise from vulnerabilities for multiple installed versions of Java by mapping specific versions to individual apps or websites. So if you're currently holding any of these licenses, like if you're subscribed to Microsoft 365 E3, E5, A3, A5, or you currently have Windows 10 Enterprise, E3, E5, Windows 10 Education, A3, A5, Windows 10 FDA for users, and RDS CALs, the FS Logics capabilities that you see there are also automatically included as part of your capabilities that you're entitled to. Let's take a short look at how it is deployed. Because of the short time that we have in this webinar, I have a bunch of links that you can visit later on. There's also a bunch of YouTube videos and also Microsoft Mechanic videos that you can visit to see how it actually happens. But I just want to make sure that I mentioned a few things that should be considered prior to. So This is the high level architecture again. So like I said, everything, the control plane, like access from the web, diagnostics, load balancing, that's all taken care of by Microsoft. And the virtual machine compute environment such as compute storage and storage and networking is also managed by Microsoft. So what you need to do now is to install or run or install the Windows Virtual Desktop server components in Azure from the Azure Marketplace. Enter a few items in the screen, like how many desktops are gonna connect, like, and then how many of these desktops are actually Windows 10 multi-sessions and things like that, and it will automatically configure the right size virtual machine for you. The prerequisites, though, before you do this, and by the way, the get started documentation is aka.ms/startwvd, is that first you have to choose an identity strategy and also a connection strategy, like do you want to use ExpressRoute or VPN to on-premises data centers. Second is to choose where to host the FS Logics profile. Do you want to do it on file server, Azure Files, or Azure NetApp Files? And then the next step is to make sure that all your credentials are needed. So you will need quite a few credentials here because you're touching on a number of aspects on Azure. You will need to be the subscription admin. You need to be the global admin for Azure Active Directory. You also actually need to be the Active Directory administrator, assuming that you, not assuming, but it is assumed that you still have Active Directory on-prem because that's where your computers or your PCs are still gonna log on and provide and ask for authentication for, and the tenant admin for Windows Virtual Desktop. So you need to have all of these. So we just talked about this. You need to be the administration of the Windows Virtual Desktop tenant once it's already created, because this admin is the one that takes a look at the diagnostics, configures the gateway, and so on, and then you also need to be the subscription admin. Of course, you need to do that so that you can create the WVD instance when you start installing. You need to be the AD global admin so that you can synchronize identities between on-premise AD and Azure Active Directory, and so on. So let's talk about network. Now, do you need a direct connection or an express route connection between your computer, between your LAN and your organization to Microsoft Azure? Most of the time, I would say yes, you will require this, especially if you have quite a few quite a few clients that will require persistent connectivity or persistent connections to their remote desktop connections that is served out of Azure. Now remember, your virtual desktop environment on the back end is now running on the servers on the Azure side on the cloud. So in order to ensure that you have fast and reliable and low latency connectivity, you may want to consider using a direct connection using ExpressRoute. So essentially, working with a network service provider such as PLDT, Globe, PCCW, Singtel, or anybody like that. We have a whole list we have a whole list of partners for that. Your LAN actually has a direct connection to one of the Azure data center regions. So you literally have a connection between your data center to our data centers in, say, Singapore. Sometimes a site-to-site VPN will work, especially if you don't have that many users and if the amount of persistent connectivity is not that high, and if the users are going to use it sporadically. Like I'm thinking of situations where you have factory workers requiring access to the desktops or applications only about 30 minutes a day, and it doesn't necessarily need to have a full desktop experience 8 hours a day. Then a site-to-site VPN may be required as well, or maybe enough. So one of the requirements on the left side is that we need to consider that the network must route to a Windows Server Active Directory. Now, you can't get rid of your Active Directory on-prem because that is still where users will authenticate to. This AD must sync with Azure AD so users can be associated between the two, because your the PC that the users are actually using needs to be authenticated or joined with Active Directory on-prem, and the desktop that you are remoting as the user is being served out of Azure. So therefore, your Active Directory that's on Azure and Active Directory on-premise should be synchronizing. For cloud-based organizations, such as, so if you're a company there where everything is on the cloud, so all of your applications are all the cloud, there's nothing left on premise except for AD directories and the PCs, Active Directory servers and the PCs themselves, you may want to go full on Azure AD domain services. This is Windows Server Active Directory that is running as a service on Azure. It allows the VMs to be domain joined and users recognize both on Azure AD and Windows Server AD. So as you can see here, if the network you don't have an Azure, you don't have an Active Directory server on-prem, but you're actually using Azure AD domain services. So this is like your Active Directory server, except that it's now running, except that it's a managed service that's running on Azure. A majority of you a majority of you and majority of customers are going to be in this environment where you have a hybrid environment. You got users that are still using devices on-prem. So you will need two types. You need the Azure Active Directory is a prerequisite for everything that's running on Azure, and Windows Server Active Directory on-premise, this one here, your AD Active Directory still needs to be connected to Azure either as site-to-site VPN or ExpressRoute, like I mentioned before, and you need to have a service called Azure AD Connect to synchronize identities between your on-prem Active Directory and the Azure Active Directory, between these two guys right here, because so that users' passwords and access control is consistent across cloud and on-premise. And then you start creating your Windows Virtual Desktop tenant. So you grant Azure AD consent, you assign a tenant creator, and then you start creating your tenant. There's the documentation URL is right here at the bottom, and there's a getting started guide called aka.ms/startwvt. What's the user experience when you do a Windows Virtual Desktop multi-session? So imagine in the next demonstration, which was captured in one of the desktops that are running Windows VT. This is a user that is trying to access their virtual desktop on an existing. Okay, so introducing Windows Virtual Desktop. As you can see, this is a video that I actually. So you start here. When you click on the Start button, you will see their Outlook and some applications which have parentheses RADC, AVD, Contoso, and so on. Which means that what you're trying to do now here is we want to establish a remote desktop connection. And this virtual desktop is actually served out of Azure already. So, and you can imagine that the virtual desktop environment on the server side has already been set up. And this is now the client. This is the virtual client. And if you go to About in Control panel, you can see that the edition is Windows 10 Enterprise for virtual desktops, which kind of shows you, which kind of proves that this is actually a Windows 10 virtual environment. Yeah, so you can run the browser, run a few apps, and let's try running a few more applications such as, for example, Outlook. So what's happening here is that you're running Outlook as a desktop application inside a virtualized desktop. So this is Office 365 Pro Plus. As you know, Outlook is part of Office 365 Pro Plus. And then let's do File Explorer, and then let's take a look at OneDrive. As you can see here, OneDrive is currently running on the virtual desktop. If I try to open one of the files, which is currently, as you see from the icon, is currently in OneDrive, I've now just synchronized it to run it on-prem or to run it on the virtual desktop itself. So essentially what I just did is that the file is now part of the desktop itself. So when I log off from this remote desktop and I log on back in, the file will be there in the OneDrive folder. So you can see here the number of users. Okay, sorry about that. What you just saw is the number of users that are currently logged onto this virtual desktop environment. Okay, so you can also virtualize Windows Server. some people do this because there are some applications, especially applications back in the day that can actually run on that should be run on Windows Server. Instead of virtualizing clients, which normally what people would actually do in a virtual desktop environment, but in certain rare instances, you need to virtualize a Windows server as well. So what do we support? It supports Windows, supports 2012 R2, R 2016, 2019. Office 365 Pro Plus support only on Windows Server 2016. Unfortunately, Office 2012 R2 and 2019 only support Office Perpetual. So it's quite important here. So you need to figure out on Windows if you want to run Windows Server in a virtual environment, and if you need Office there, and if you need Office there, only our 2012 Office R2 or Office 2012 R2 and Office 2019. Sorry, let me take that back. Windows Server 2012 R2 and 2019 only support Office Perpetual. So it requires the use of Windows Server VMs on Azure, but you can also leverage Azure Hybrid Benefit for cost savings. So if you're familiar with Azure Hybrid Benefit, it means that if you have Windows Server licenses with software assurance, you can actually get discounts on running virtual servers on Azure because you are paying for software assurance. Now, you can also let's talk about a little bit about virtualizing Windows 7. Do you still want to virtualize Windows 7? Now we understand that there are still a lot of customers out there that still want to run Windows 7. They can't let go of Windows 7 for one reason or the other. Maybe because of application compatibility, or they're not sure if their application is going to run on Windows 10, or they're just simply not ready. We can virtualize Windows 7 on the WVD service on Azure. The advantage here is that it includes 3 years enterprise and extended support. It requires full Windows 7 desktop. And we recommend this as a last resort. So because you may not need to you may actually not need to virtualize the entire Windows 7 desktop itself, but virtualize the application that runs in Windows 7. So use use remote app to do that. And of course, use App Assure, our assurance to our customers that Windows 7 applications are run on Windows 10. Okay, so talking about full desktop versus remote app, when do you use which? So on a full desktop environment, so this will be for users or developers that need to install their own apps and admin privileges, and their clients are lacking computing power or outdated. So we're talking about a situation where you have a few users, their PCs are so old, cannot run Windows 10 anymore, and but the PCs can still run a limited version of Windows 10 so that they can do. So what you would do is for those computers that are lacking computer power, deinstall all the applications, but instead run the applications off a full desktop environment that is virtualized to be served to that computer. Now for remote app, this means that you do not need the full desktop to be virtualized, but rather you're virtualizing the applications only itself. So meaning the client PC still has Windows installed, Windows 10 installed. You're not virtualizing the desktops. We are just running a virtualized version of the application from the WVD service of Azure. I hope that did not confuse you. So the clients, so this is useful where, for example, where the client PCs vary widely and application consistency is impacted. So you may have a piece of applications where it will run slowly on slow PCs and it will run faster on newer PCs. But if you want consistent application performance, whether or not the PC is old or new, then you may want to use remote app for that. Now, of course, it will require more resources on the Azure side if you give everybody full desktops. It will use less resources on the Azure side if you do remote apps. So it may be a choice. It may whittle down to listing down the users, whether this user will really require full desktop or whether certain users will just really require just an application or just a virtualized application. So deployment, as far as deployment is concerned, onboarding will be through the Azure Marketplace or through GitHub using ARM templates to deploy the new or existing or update existing host pool. So what we've done is that we already have images on Azure Marketplace. All you need to do is just go to Azure Marketplace and then run the image, and it will configure everything for you. The scripts will automatically configure the virtual machines, install the operating system, configure the Windows server on the virtual machines to be serving remote desktop, and after a few minutes, you now have WVD on Azure. Now, on the management side, the Azure portal will be your primary management interface for the WVD. PowerShell is also still the option that's available for repeated deployment, Azure integration, and other options would include Terraform or partner management solutions. Some performance guidelines: VM should be deployed to Azures where there are WVD clusters. Well, the good news is that there are now WVD clusters in practically every region of Azure today, so that should not be a problem. Active Directory data centers should be in region where the session host pools are located. Okay, that makes sense. Well, try to make sure that your Azure Active Directory, whether it's domain services or the AD service itself, is located in the same region as do your virtual machines that run WVD. Recommend a mix of breadth and depth scaling to accommodate peak and non-peak timing. Leverage multi-session user density. So as much as possible, take advantage of the fact that you can run Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session only on Azure so that you reduce the amount of virtual machines that's required, meaning lower costs for Azure. And VM configuration should match the use case and host pool need. Good. This is a great chart for you to capture. This is a list of Office support dates. So Office 365 Pro Plus, because this is cloud and it's evergreen, it's always going to be supported. But you have different set of support end dates for different versions of perpetual Office, whether it's Office 2019, 2016, 2013, or 2010. And as you can see on the left side, depends on the type of operating system you need for your virtual desktops. Say, for example, if you are running Windows 10 long-term servicing channel 2018, which will end support in 2028, it no longer supports 2016, 2013, and Office 2010. It will only run Office 2019, and it will do that until in the survey, and it will do that until October 2025, which is until the client is support. So this is kind of a chart that explains when certain Office applications are going to be supported on which, or when support will end on certain types of Office versions on which window. So remote desktop is ideal if you want full end-to-end control of the desktop virtualization environment. In place upgrade of existing Windows Server RDS. Supports pure cloud, pure on-prem or hybrid, and supports lift and shift burst into cloud migration. Windows Virtual Desktop is ideal if you want Microsoft managing the brokering platform as a service. Now, what's the difference between the left side and the right side? This left side means that your current RDS services on Windows Server, you can actually run Windows Server on a VM in Azure and run that as RDS. So it's no different from RDS on-prem, except that physically it's running on Azure virtual machines instead of actual physical hosts in your data center. So that's why you see here full end-to-end control and so on. But if you want to use the Windows Virtual Desktop, which is the managed service, the reason why I say managed service is because Microsoft manages the brokering platform, orchestration, etc. And this is the only option if you want Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session with free Windows 7 ESU. I mean, I'm just putting it out there. There may be some customers who will say, "Oh, I really want RDS. I still want virtual desktops, but I want to have full control over everything." Similar to the level of control I have if I were to run RDS on-prem, but not run it on-prem anymore, but run it on Azure. Well, the one on the left side, that's the one for you. So one transformation part is focusing on operational efficiency. So these are some of the reasons, if you will. your data center contracts will expire, you have urgent capacity needs, you have software and hardware that needs to be refreshed, and you have software end of support. So for example, you may have virtual environments where you are running Windows servers, and those Windows servers are on Windows Server 2008. Or if the clients that you're trying to serve is Windows 7, and the users don't want to move from Windows 7 to Windows 10 or can't move for one reason or the other. Um, one one practice you can use is to just simply rehost whatever your RDS environment is currently on premise. Just simply move that to Azure. So you have a reliable Azure platform. You take advantage of Azure only benefits such as hybrid benefits in EOS and right size workloads. And then you can start doing refactoring. You can now start looking at the applications itself and using the rehosted RDS environment as a temporary reprieve, if you will, while you start thinking about refactoring, architecting, and rebuilding your applications that you currently. The second type of transformation path is kind of more innovation and efficiency focused. So these are some of the reasons why you want to move out. What you want to do it at the same time. So you rehost your virtual desktop environment into say WVD on Azure while doing refactoring, re-architecting, and rebuilding at the same time. So all the things that you will need to learn about Azure migration is all on azure.com/migrate. It has discovery, assessment, migration, infrastructure, and data tools. So assessments, migration, integrated experience with end-to-end progress tracking, and choice of tools with ISV integration. All the tools are there if you want to do it yourself. However, I do not recommend that you do it yourself, especially if you're going to do this one time. We have many, many partners that has done this multiple times with multiple customers, and they have the experience of doing it yourself. So reach out to your Microsoft partner or reach out to me if you have thousands of desktops, for example, that you want to move to a virtualized environment, and that virtualized environment you want it powered. This is the Azure Migrate Hub screenshot. You can also access it within the Azure portal itself. Okay, so what are the next steps? Learn more. And, this is the URL, quite a long URL, but it's good to remember this. If you want to learn how to deploy, it's on Microsoft Docs. Get started today by going to aka.ms/wvd get started. If you want to experience, if you want to have an experience, so one of the more common questions I have that we always get is that, okay, if I move my RDS or if I do Windows virtual desktops powered on Azure, and Azure is in a remote data center somewhere in Singapore, Hong Kong, or wherever else in the 54 regions, how am I going to be so sure on what the latency, if the latency I have between my network here in my office to the Azure data centers is good enough for Windows Virtual Desktop? You can find that out by going to aka.ms/wvd/experience estimator. It will actually estimate for you the turnaround time, the latency, and the number of hops, and then it will give you an estimate whether your current network connection is enough or not. So then you can make a choice whether you want to deploy WVD on which Azure region, or make a choice between, or choose a region but then deploy express route, so you have a better experience in terms of connectivity because you now have a direct connection between your data center and Azure just for WVD. To calculate your cost, you can go to WVD pricing. It has a great tool to estimate how much is it going to cost you from an Azure consumption standpoint, how much you're going to be paying for Azure depending on the number of users that's going to be doing virtual desktops all at the same time concurrently, and the type and amount of applications that will be part of those. So these are the typical challenges that we encounter from customers, and this is what the customer challenges are, and this is how WVD helps. So some of the challenges, like there are some performance capabilities that can only be resolved, or that can be resolved by doing multiple session on Windows 10. And like I said multiple times a few minutes back, only Windows Virtual Desktop on Azure can provide you with Windows 10 multi-session experience. If you're an Office 365 user and you're experiencing poor poor experience on Office 365 because in a non-persistent multi-user environment, because some apps such as Outlook and OneDrive require data persistence, then the answer is WVD. So if you start virtualizing your desktops power that using WVD and Azure, you have the FSX logics capabilities with the profile containers that significantly increases the performance of Office 365 in a non-persistent multi-session environment. If you want a scalable remote desktop deployment that requires deep knowledge to run smoothly, so this is one of the challenges that some of our customers face. Simply put, I don't have the skills nor the time to run an RDS environment in my data center anymore. I just rather use a managed service that's provided for by someone. So the answer there is RDS, to move your Windows Server RDS and apps to Azure, because we provide for we manage the orchestration and the back end parts of it, and you just provide the end user and the desktop administration, such as end user credentials and what the users can and cannot do in virtual desktop environment. Deploying and monitoring virtual deployments, it can be a high overhead functions. A lot of customers spend a lot of time dealing with user complaints such as, oh, my desktop is running so slow. Can you find out why? In this case, because you're running on the cloud, you can actually scale up your Windows virtual desktop environment on the server side much quicker, maybe in a temporary basis until users because often a lot of times the reason users complain about slow RDS usage is because there's just simply too many of them accessing at the same time. So this may be a situation where you want to bump up the capabilities of the server or the capacity of the server side just to accommodate those number of users, and then just reduce the server capability once the number of users get reduced as well. And you can only get that flexibility plus the flexibility in cost if you run that on Azure. That's the end of our webinar. So a few more reminders before we end. You can still get your Azure free account. So if you want to play around with Windows Virtual Desktop and all the other Azure services, you can get a $200 credit when you go to azure.com/free. You get 12 months of popular free services and more than 25 services that are always free as long as your free account is enabled. So these are the different products that are free each month of the year. So as long as you don't go over these limits, then you're fine. And these are all of the products that are always going to be free while your free account is active. Now, please take note that your $200 credit remains intact if you don't go over the usage limits that I showed you in the previous slide. But once you start using more services that's above the usage limits, then that's the only time that we debit the $200 until it gets down to zero. Before it gets down to zero, however, you will get a reminder through the portal, through an email, to ask you if you want to top up on your existing free credit by charging your credit card or or getting a contact from a partner who can then transition your free account into a paid account through a local partner. Online training is all available on Microsoft Learn. So it's all on Microsoft Learn. So here's the URL. Okay, or you can just go aka.ms/mslearn, and then part of the gig here is that you can choose the role that you have. So I think we're adding a new role called Virtual Desktop Administrator so that all the content will be curated and will be selected based on the type of role that you currently have. There's a special school just for AI, for aischool.microsoft.com. So all the stuff that you need to learn, how to build chatbots using our AI cognitive services, building machine learning models, embedding them in applications, that's all in aischool.microsoft.com. We still have the Microsoft Professional Program. It's free online training. So if you want to learn the basics of data science, artificial intelligence, IoT, cybersecurity, big data, data analysis, and so on and so forth, you can go to academy.microsoft.com. A lot of the lecturers here are not really Microsoft employees, but are actually academia and professionals in the so the training here is less Microsoft, but more of domain expertise on the domains that I have just mentioned a while. And all the documentation is on Microsoft Docs. Just go to docs.microsoft.com and select on the Azure component. A lot of the links that I've just mentioned in the previous slide are all here in Microsoft Docs. There's video links, there's documented training, there's links to GitHub on how on or for you to learn how to configure, manage, and deploy Windows virtual desktops on Azure. Right. So if you like this webinar, typically these webinars are an hour long. These are the scheduled webinars in the next few weeks. So we try to do one every 2 weeks. The next one will be VMware. The next one will be Cloud Adoption Framework. So you may not. So if you're interested in any of these topics, just go to aka.ms/msfy20 webinars, case sensitive, and then click on the links to register for those future webinars. You may or may not receive invitations to these webinars. So just to be sure, go to this URL and register them yourselves. As much as possible to record these webinars, and I forgot, this entire webinar will also probably end up in YouTube in my channel very soon, maybe a month or 2 months after the live session of this webinar. So you can listen to this webinar anytime you want, move forward, backwards in YouTube. And then again, like I said, you also will receive an email within 24 to 48 hours from now of the recording of this webinar. All right, so that's the end of this webinar. Thank you for sticking out for me for 1 hour. I hope you were able to learn about how you can conserve space in your data center and provide your customers with a better remote desktop experience by running Windows virtual desktops on Azure. So I've been your host, Herns, from Microsoft Philippines. If you have any more questions, just pop it into the Q&A window again. Try to answer them. I hope I was able to answer a few questions that just popped in. Or send me an email, hhermida@microsoft.com. If you're interested in any of these services at all, if you need help, just shout out, send me an email, and then I will refer you to the right people or to the right partner to help you out. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day and see you in the next sessions. Bye.